Ooh, we can talk.
I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to get onto the meeting. Since it's only 4:01, we'll start in just a couple of minutes. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to welcome you to our exciting evening where we're going to be presenting CMS's school reopening plan for when and if we are able to come back into a hybrid model. My name is Jennifer Casper. I'm the assistant principal here at Carmel Middle School, and I have our two counselors with us tonight as well. So I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves right now. Sarah, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Greco, and I'm your student's counselor if their last name begins with A through K.
Good evening, everyone, and I am Melissa Magretta, and I am your student school counselor, or maybe will be your student school counselor if your last name begins with L through Z. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
So I want to start by saying that the real purpose of this presentation is to assist you in making the best educated decision that you can for whether you'd like your child to stay in a distance learning model or to come to campus when and if we're able to go into a hybrid model. And I know that the district will be sending you out a survey this week in order to choose either model, which I think will be due next Friday. So please feel free to ask whatever questions you have tonight so that we can ensure that you have all the information that you need to move forward. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and jump into, I can never get my arrows won't work once we go into the Zoom. I don't know why, so I'm going to have to keep doing it that way. So I want to start with health and safety, which I know is of utmost importance to all of us. And we obviously can't control what's going on in the world with the pandemic and everything outside of campus, but we're doing the best that we can to ensure that we have a safe campus for your students to return to when we are able. So I want to start with arrivals and departures. We will be having a highly structured drop-off and pickup routine where students will be dropped according to grade level on different parts of the campus. We will assume that as you come onto campus, you will have already done our recommended health screening prior to leaving home. And this is a similar health screening to those that you get when you're going to the doctor's office now, or going into some place that's public where they ask you if you've had exposure or had a fever, so on and so forth. So as a child comes onto campus, they will enter the queue to have a temperature check done. We will have numerous staff members there to do the checks in the morning to keep the traffic moving. Your child will stay in the car until their temperature is checked. And when they go ahead and pass, they will be able to move out of the car to come onto campus. Students who are taking the bus will actually be temperature checked prior to getting onto the bus, and then they will be checked again when they enter campus. So once a student moves onto the campus, they will have a very controlled pathway that they can move through. We have numerous arrows and things that are going to be up, fencing. And once they enter their classroom, we will make sure that all desks are arranged so they're 6 feet apart. We will now be moving into cohorts that will have a maximum of 9 students per classroom. So there will only be 9 students that they will be moving with throughout the day. And we currently have a model set up where our teachers will actually they're teamed together right now in teams of 4 based on core academics. So that team of 4 will be moving classrooms temporarily for this school year so that they're all located on the side of one of our buildings because we have 4 classrooms in a row. So the idea being that that cohort of students will only need to move from classroom to classroom in between classes, and they will stay on the one side of the building in order to control movement and interaction on the campus. And it's also important to understand that students will stay with that same cohort of 9 throughout the entire day, including when they're eating lunch. So the non-classroom setting, we will be staggering the use of restrooms to reduce contact. And if there's an emergency, obviously we'll make a special exception. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be minimizing congestion in the hallways and public spaces. So what does that look like? We'll have certain hallways that will be blocked off so that students can't walk through certain areas to try to control the direction of traffic. We will also have fencing in the front of school so that there'll be certain areas you can enter and exit. We worked with a company, Mr. Morgan and I met with them last week or the week prior to break and walked the entire campus. They are helping us to make sure that we have all the proper signage, all the correct markings on the ground to make sure that students are 6 feet apart and on our benches, so on and so forth, so that we're following all of the strict guidelines put out by the state of California. We will also be, as I said, controlling the flow of traffic, and we're going to go ahead and discontinue the use of our lockers this year, and students will not be dressing out for PE while they're on campus. Face coverings will be worn by staff and by students all day, no exception, except for, I guess, when they're eating and drinking. We do have cohorts of students that are on campus right now, and the masks are not bothering them at all. They actually just forget that they're even on. So I don't see this as being a problem, but we want to ensure that students are safe as well as our staff. Cleaning and maintenance, our classrooms will be disinfected between every class. So we have a built-in 15-minute passing period between each class, and that will give teachers time to clean and give the cleaning material time to work to disinfect the desks before the students re-enter. Classrooms will also be disinfected again at the end of the day for the start of the next school day. Bathrooms are currently cleaned every 2 hours, and we will stay on that schedule once we're back on campus. And there are hand sanitizing stations located throughout the campus and in every classroom. Food services will still be available while students are here on campus. And the bonus this year is that all meals will be free to every student who is here, and we'll be taking a lunch count, most likely either in the evening or in the morning when students arrive on campus to see how many students will be eating. We'll be serving our meals outdoors, and as we foresee it now, they'll be rolled out on carts throughout the campus. They'll be easy grab and go meals so that we can just excuse classes one at a time, and 9 students who are socially distanced can walk up, grab a meal, and go back to wherever they're eating. They will have designated eating areas on the campus where their cohort can sit in a distanced area and be able to have lunch. If it's raining, we'll obviously eat indoors. So as far as transportation goes, we're currently limited to the outlying areas of our district. So we won't be offering busing in town as of right now. But if students are taking the bus, if you do live in those outlying areas, the bus drivers and the students, just as when they're on campus, will have face coverings on at all times. We'll have a maximum of 14 students to each bus. And the buses are thoroughly cleaned and disinfected after every run. So let's jump into the nitty-gritty of our hybrid model. Students are going to be broken into A and B cohorts. So when we created the program that we have currently in place for distance learning, we had given you a survey at the beginning of the year asking if you thought you would like to stay in a distance learning model or if you thought you would come back on campus as hybrid. And that was obviously just to feel people out. We weren't holding you to anything. And so when Mr. Morgan created the classes of students, he put together groups of students that could be easily broken into 2 cohorts that would come onto campus for hybrid, and then moved in as the extra students, because we can only have 18 that we can break into 2 groups of 9. Those were the students who had said that they would like to stay in a distance learning model. So ideally, what we will do is just take your child's class, and that class will be broken into 2 different cohorts. We were originally saying, and I believe we're still trying to stick to this, that we will break them up alphabetically, and that's to help the families who have children that are at the elementary and at the middle school so that your students are on campus on the same days. So if you're in the A cohort, you would be on campus on Mondays and Wednesdays. And if you're in the B cohort, on those days, you would be at home learning asynchronously, completing homework and assignments, and taking your elective classes. And then that would swap on Tuesdays and Thursdays with the B group coming onto campus and the A group working from home. We are going to stay with an ABC model. And on that C day, which is Friday, it will be a teacher prep and planning and collaboration day. There is a lot of work that has to go into this type of a model. And we want to make sure that our teachers are prepared and providing the best teaching that they can. That will also be a really important time for our teachers to check in with students, hold office hours, make sure that they're regrouping with their distance learning students. And teachers can handle that any way they can. One of the things that we've talked about, especially on that day, is possibly bringing in the band students and even the chorus students, depending on what the restrictions and rules are at the time that we're able to come back on. They're already slightly lightening the restrictions on band students. So we'd love to see if we could do either an after school club so those kids get to finally play together, or possibly have them come on campus on Friday for a couple hours and be out on the field distanced and playing. And same with chorus if and when we are cleared to do so. So when they're on campus, they will be here from 8 a.m. till 2 p.m. each day. So drop off will probably be around the same time as it was before we went into this model, because we will need to be doing temperature checks, which is going to take us quite a while to get all kids on campus. So we've talked about doing a staggered entrance to campus. So we'll see once we plan that part all out what we decide on. But when a student is on campus, they will be taking their core academics and their PE class. Understanding that there will be a reduction in class periods. In the past, our students have taken 7 periods when they're on campus, but with a 15-minute passing period needed to be put in between each class period, we needed to shorten that to their core classes, which is the 4 classes they're currently taking, as well as a possible PE class. We're still not 100% sure we can do that, but it would be a small group, their cohort, going outside and working out in ways that were acceptable and approved by the guidelines within the state. So when students are at home, as I stated earlier, they will be remote learning. They will not have access to their teacher. That's really important to understand, because their teacher will be on campus actually working with the students who are here for that day. So they'll be on their own working asynchronously. They'll be completing homework assignments, projects, things that have been assigned to them while they were in class. We will most likely have a live office hours that they can check in with. It won't be their teacher, but another staff member should they need help with anything. And we will be holding our optional elective classes. And I say optional because we don't make our electives mandatory this year. So the other choice you have is of remote schooling, which is what we're in now, staying in the distance learning model for the duration of the school year. So with this distance learning model, it's pretty much what we're doing now. Your student would be in distance learning Monday through Thursday, but they would also look the same as the hybrid model, where that Friday will now become a check-in, an office hours day, and a teacher collaboration day. So this model is going to be dependent on how many people decide to stay in the distance learning model. We have a few different ideas of how we'd like to run it, but we really have to see how many students decide to choose to stay home and what kind of cohorts we can create. Our number one choice would be to actually be able to create classes of the students who are staying home and assign them to a teacher who is on campus. So for example, if I'm a math teacher and it's my A day, I would teach 3 periods of math to my students that are on campus. And then my 4th period would be a distance learning class, and I would switch over to Zoom and teach my students who were at home. So ideally, that would be the best way for us to be able to do it. And with that, we might be able to get creative where they take 2 of their classes on Monday, 2 on Tuesday, so that they're seeing people every day while they're gone, as well as their electives, or at least they have their core classes just like a hybrid student does on, let's say, Monday, Wednesday, and then they have their electives on Tuesday, Thursday. Now, with that in mind, we have to really be considering what are the key things we want to look at when making this decision, because it's definitely not an easy decision to make, and only you know what's best for your family and for your student. So you have to really consider your personal COVID health concerns. We are going to do our best to keep students safe and healthier and follow all, or safe and healthy, sorry, and follow all of the necessary guidelines. But you have to consider that as well, how well your child is currently functioning in a distance learning model. You know, for some of our students, they're doing better than they ever have in a distance learning model. And for other students, it's the opposite. So you really have to look at your family and your child and what's going to work best for you. You also have to understand that there is a high likelihood that if you do stay in a distance learning model, your child will have to change who their teachers are. And that's only because we aren't really sure if we'll have enough students to create a period for every single teacher that's currently here. It's really going to depend on the numbers and how they shake out. We're lucky at the middle school because our teachers work so incredibly well as a team. They're just an amazing staff. And so even if your child switches from one 7th grade science teacher to another 7th grade science teacher, they're going to be getting the same experience because our teachers plan and work so cohesively together. Key considerations for if you want to come into school and be part of our hybrid program is really, you know, when I look at it, the main reason to go into hybrid right now is for the social emotional piece, to allow students that time that they can finally see each other, be together face to face, and get out of their homes and feel like life is somewhat normal. You know, they're going to lose some of their actual learning if we move into a hybrid model. I mean, that's just being honest. They're going to move from 5 days a week of lessons down to 2 days a week of lessons, and really only participating in their academic program when they're on campus. It's going to look very different when you're on this campus. It's not going to be like the typical middle school experience where at break you're out and you're talking to all your friends and you can go out and play basketball and all those different things. They're going to be cohorted with that same group of 9 students all day while they're here, you know, so that's another thing to consider. They will still be distance learning at home for 3 days of the week. And during that time, they will not have a teacher available to them at all times like they do now. They won't have set class times. They'll be just working on their optional electives, which will be set class times if they're in an elective. I take that back. But they'll also be completing asynchronous classwork that's been assigned to them. And then they will have office hours that they can check in on Fridays. So that being said, our teachers have a big job of making sure that if we do move into a hybrid model, that they're choosing the content, the priority standards that need to be taught to ensure that our students are ready to move on to next year. And I think that that is about all from me at this point. So I want to go ahead and open it to questions and comments. I know that was a very quick overview, and we will be sending out more information that you can actually read, because I don't know about you, but I'm a visual learner in the future. So Trisha, and do we have questions?
You do. I'm going to let Mark Angel talk. Mark, you have the 1 minute.
Great.
Please unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hi, Mark.
How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks.
Thank you all so much for doing this. And I wanted to ask, when you're doing the hybrid screen time, my question would be, our biggest issue is screen time, Adam being on the screen. So when we send him to school 2 days a week, when he come home, will he have book work to do that he can do at home without the computer, so that he is not on the computer on the days off, but he's only at school or at home doing schoolwork, but he's not spending all this time on his Chromebook?
That is a very good question. And I think it's going to depend from week to week and the teachers and the assignments. Obviously, they'll have more of an ability to not assign things on the computer because we can run off copies and hand things out, and you know, they can assign things in books, but I don't have a direct answer for that because every teacher is going to be different. And I know when I was a teacher, every week that I gave homework, it looked different. Sometimes it was on the computer, sometimes it was not. So I wish I could give you a more direct answer to that, but all I can say is it should vary, and they won't have, you know, they won't be on the screen from 8 until noon like they are now, right? They will be able to work at their own pace. If they want to get on in the morning and do an hour's worth of work and then take a couple hours off, they can. They'll have more flexibility in their day.
That sounds really good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm going to let Allison Dunton ask your question. Allison, if you can please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I wanted to ask how much of the distance learning will be synchronous versus asynchronous? I understand Friday will change, but will they still have a similar bell schedule for synchronous learning with a live teacher if they stay in the distance learning model?
That's another great question. So if we are able to do it like we're planning, where they would be assigned a teacher on campus who's currently here teaching, who would just swap over to teaching a distance learning section of their class, then they would still be on a regular bell schedule, right? Because they would be checking into their academics just as if they were on campus from 8 until noon. That's going to depend on how many students actually choose to stay in the distance learning model. The other option we have is doing something where a teacher who is unable to come back to campus, if we don't have enough students to create cohorts that are being taught, period by period, doing more of an independent study program where they're working with a teacher who's kind of overseeing their learning in all the 4 core subjects, because they would still be able to get into all of their electives. So it's a lot of it is numbers and how we're going to play it out. What our ideal situation is that they would still have their 8 to noon day. Electives will also move to the morning. So on those days that they are not seeing their classroom teachers, electives would now run from 8 until noon instead of noon until 4, like we currently have it set up.
I'm going to let Seaberry Nockbar ask her question. Seaberry, if you'll please unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm actually
Hi.
asking hi. I'm actually asking a question on behalf of Rain.
Okay.
She rides her bike to school typically, and during a typical year, and she was curious if that would be allowed under this hybrid model with the required safety measures that and precautions that are going to take place.
That's another great question. And please tell Rain I said hi and thank you for asking. We plan on having a station set up for our students who walk in through that Rio Road entrance and who bike in. So that would absolutely be allowed. They would just have to stop at the screening station that I foresee will be back by the gym as they come up onto campus and have their clearance done, their temperature checked.
So it looks like we have another one, Randall Frederick. Randall, if you'll unmute yourself, please.
Hi.
Hi.
So I want to thank you guys. It's a ton of work. Obviously, it's amazing to see what you guys have done. I'm wondering what percentage of students that need to do hybrid would swing it, I guess, like to make the hybrid go into effect. Because personally, when I look at it, I think it unfortunately makes it worse for both sides. Because my kids they're on. They haven't missed a class. They've got 6 classes. They're structured. It's Monday through Friday. They're organized. And looking at the hybrid, they're coming, they're going. They're not really getting a social emotional benefit. So I just see it being a lot of work. And I'm just wondering, like I said, I guess how many people need to want to do hybrid in order for that to kick in?
Well, for it to kick in to begin with, we have to move into the red tier. So we can't even consider it until we move into the red tier and we've been there for 14 days where we've stayed under the numbers that have been allotted by the county, which is 7 cases per 100,000. And then I think it's a 4% positivity rate or somewhere near there. So once we moved into the red tier, passed through the 14 days where we haven't had any elevation in cases, then we would consider the hybrid model. It's interesting you're asking that question because we haven't looked at, well, what happens if we don't have a large enough amount of students who want to come back to hybrid, that they want to stay in a distance learning program. So that's something that we'll have to cross as we start to look at the numbers. My understanding thus far is that we open into hybrid. So I don't know that there is an option. I hate that I don't have a clear answer on that, but it hasn't really been presented that, oh, we have to have 50% of the school to be able to move into a hybrid option.
Are there any, oh, we have hands. So it looks like Allison Dunton has another, we don't have any new hands raised. So Allison Dunton has another question and then
Great.
Mark Angel.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm wondering after we complete the survey and mark our selection, if we select hybrid and then based on your numbers, maybe it's the other direction. I guess what I'm trying to find out is if we elected distance learning and then we found out that it was going to be more asynchronous than now, would we have the option to switch to hybrid? And part of the reason I'm asking is I agree with the previous person who commented that we have a pretty good schedule. It's very structured. I also have an elementary school student, and the asynchronous time is most challenging because we both work, and that requires more of our attention when it's asynchronous. And so a big part of our decision really is how much of that time is live. And so I'm just wondering if we will have an ability to make a change if there's not much synchronous learning if we did opt for the distance learning choice.
Right. That's a great question. And I completely understand that concern. I think that's part of what makes this such a difficult decision. Once you make the decision, unfortunately, you are unable to move back and forth because we would just have people pulling in and out of classes. And that would kind of cause chaos with our cohorts and what was happening on campus. I think it's going to be a challenge enough with such a huge school population to get us all on campus with cohorts of only 9 allowed in our classrooms. So unfortunately, the answer is that you won't be able to move, but I want to assure you that we will try everything in our power to make sure that those students are seeing a teacher and learning from a teacher, because that's what we want to happen. I only foresee the other option happening if, because I think that we're going to have enough numbers both directions to offer both things. But I think that you just have to know that once you make that decision is set for the remainder of the year.
So just to let everyone know, if we get new people to raise their hands, I will be putting them in line first that haven't asked the question. So sorry, Mark, and giving them an opportunity to speak. And then I will go back to those that have already had the opportunity. So I'm going to let Shogun Danielson ask her question, or his question, sorry.
That's okay, thank you. I have 2 questions. I also have an elementary school student and a middle school student. And the first is, the distance learning is working great for my middle schooler and it's harder for my elementary school. And I assume that I could do different things for each of them and that it's not per household, but I could do my elementary school could potentially be hybrid and my middle school could choose to do either. Those could be different. I'm checking that.
Yes,
And
you are correct in that. Yes.
And then the other question is just about the busing. You had mentioned busing. So the busing will be available. I live out in Jamesburg. So that bus will be running basically the same time that it was before we had COVID.
The timing, the schedule will probably change because we're starting later and all of our schedules have shifted. Like the elementary is going to be starting later than they were. We're starting later than we normally were, but the bus will still be coming in from that area. It'll just be an updated schedule of times. And I also wanted to add in, I had 2 things that I thought of right after Allison came off, is that most of you are probably attending the elementary presentation right after this, but you're going to see that the elementary is really not changing much from distance to hybrid. So your child will still be very much engaged with their teacher online or their specialists online. They will have much more of a controlled schedule than we were originally talking about in elementary. And the other comment that I wanted to make is that it's actually the school board that will make the decision whether we go back or not. So once we are cleared and we're in the red tier and the county says that we can reopen, it will be the school board that makes that final decision. Thank you. Go ahead, Tricia. You can bring the next person on.
Sure. It's going to be Shel Rittermall. Shel, if you can unmute yourself, please, or Shelly.
Hi, yeah, it's Shelley. Thank you very much for all the work you guys are doing. I had a question. What if a family actually doesn't respond to the survey? I wondered what was going to happen with them. Another question I had was regarding sports. If there was going to be any introduction to any of the sports. You said on Fridays, you guys might be reintroducing band and chorus. And I was wondering about like track and other things like that. And my other question had to do with if a student is showing any signs of sickness, which is quite often, how is that going to be handled? If, a child shows up with, the sniffles, or they cough once, or they sneeze once, are they going to, exited off the campus? And if that happens, how long do they have to stay off campus? And if that also happens, like, does that mean his sibling who's in another school, or even at that school, do they have to be gone for a certain amount of time too? It just kind of seems like this weird snowball effect and does everybody have to get tested if they have any sign of sickness?
So before you mute her, can I just clarify? I want to make sure I got all 3 questions. So one is about COVID. One was about okay, I got them all. I just remembered the first one. Okay. So your first question was, what happens if somebody doesn't answer the survey? And we will be calling those people to see what their response will be, until we get in touch with them to make sure that we know whether they're coming on campus or whether they're not. Second question was around sports. As you know, the high school will be bringing back their sports programs in the next couple of weeks for some conditioning. We have not even started to look at sports. We're just trying to get the campus open, and we're obviously in a different situation since our sports are intramural and they're not involved in leagues where we're following what other schools are doing. So that's an excellent question, and one I definitely want to look into. And I do see us using those Fridays as times that we might be able to run certain things. It's really going to be where the county is at and the guidelines and what we're being told. And as we all know, in this world of COVID, everything changes day by day. I say one thing and then a week later, it's completely different. So as of right now, we currently have no plans to run a sport program. That does not mean that in a month we won't. We want to get kids out and moving. We just haven't gotten to actually planning that part of it yet. We've been focused on the academics. And then your last question was about COVID. I'm so happy you brought that up, because one of the things I wanted to direct you all to, if some of you saw the board meeting last night, you saw an excellent presentation by some of the members of our AC going over our safety plan that was just introduced. It's a nice 138-page document. It has all your answers to everything, and that is currently on our website and very clearly marked for you to look through. But it has all of our protocols of what's going to happen. And I know that is a concern. I mean, kids have allergies, we all do. And if they sneeze or sniffle, but there are certain symptoms that we look for in COVID before we send a student home. And so please refer to that document, and all of your answers will be there for you, I promise. And we also have moved our nurses station over to our girls' locker room because we won't be using that area anymore. So we already have a separate area for a student who does show up with COVID symptoms, like in the middle of a school day. We also have a whole nother area on the other side of like up on the top stairs from the gym, far away from that area, for where the nurse can see other students, so they'll be safe. And the nice part about using that gym locker room is that when a parent comes to pick up their sick student, they just pull right up in front of the gym. That student goes right out the door, and we're not cross-contaminating anyone else at that point. So I encourage you to look at the document to get, it should have all of your answers. And I don't want to say any and misspeak at all. Is there another question?
Yeah, you have a few. Lewis Harris is next. Lewis, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you for doing this. I joined a little bit late and might have missed this, but is the middle school only going to go into hybrid once Monterey County goes into red? A waiver is not going to be, or is a waiver being submitted for the middle school too, like the elementary school?
So right now there is not an option for a waiver for the middle school. The current waiver being offered by the state is an elementary K-6 waiver, but it's K-6 for elementary campuses that do go up to 6th grade, because some campuses do still have their 6th graders on an elementary campus. So for us, we don't have the option to apply for a waiver. We have to wait until the county has been moved into the red tier, and we have to stay in that red tier for 14 days before we would all be cleared to open. It's a good question.
So I'm going to go to Barbara McBride. Barbara, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Yep, can you hear me?
Hi, Barb.
Hi, everybody. So for those listening, I'll just identify that I'm both a CMS parent and I'm a CHS teacher. So I wear a couple of hats here, but I'm just wondering, Jen, if I'm listening to the other parents and we have this sort of chicken and egg scenario, right? Where we're going to be asked to make a commitment to something that it's a little bit nebulous. but you can't tell us what the full program is until you have that commitment. So that makes it a little bit tricky on the parent end. Because like you said, once we make the commitment, we can't go back on it. I'm just wondering if the district might consider sort of a two-part survey that, first is just sort of reaction to this information about, under these conditions, would you consider doing that, so that I guess we can have one more level of input as parents before we have to make the final commitment that might give the district some data about, what percentage of people are thinking about staying distance before we have to make the final commitment. I know we're under some time pressure, but just hoping that the district might consider that.
Sure. And did you have another question? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
My other one was just super simple about, right now there's a couple student clubs running, and I'm just wondering when that would occur, if any thought's been given to that. I'm guessing there wouldn't be in the hybrid days. They would be still on the days when students are home. So like how can a club run, or is that just on Fridays, or what would
Okay,
that be?
good questions. Okay, so starting with your first question, I want to definitely clarify that I think I was probably too nebulous in the way I described it, and that's my fault. Obviously, the hybrid program is very clear. You're going to have your classes 2 days a week. You're going to be on campus, normally taking classes in a cohort of 9 people with your core curriculum and your PE class. And then the 2 days that you're not on campus, you're going to be at home completing asynchronous assignments and taking elective classes. So, and then Friday will be off for everyone, whether you are in distance learning or not. If you're in distance learning, you will definitely be still getting your core curriculum. It's going to look very similar to if you were on a hybrid. You're either going to be Zooming in with our actual teachers, or you will be Zooming in with people who are presenting curriculum or overseeing curriculum or assisting you with that. And then on the opposite days, you would be doing your electives. And then Fridays, you would be open just like. So I don't want it to feel like it's this very dark, like, what is it going to look like? It's going to look very similar whether you're on campus or off campus. You're just going to be on campus taking your core classes, or you're going to be off campus taking them. I just don't know what your actual timing would be, your schedule, but you would definitely be checking in with somebody and seeing a human. I just don't know who that person's going to be at this point, and it will depend on how many people we get. So I wanted to clarify that and make sure I'm really clear that they're going to be very similar programs. You're just going to be at home for the entire time for one and on campus for 2 days for the other. And then that being said, clubs, we have not talked about clubs yet either, but that's another thing that we could possibly bring on. The hard part is, yes, it would have to be in small cohorts. So I ideally see that it would probably stay as it is now, which is in the distance learning environment, so that we can have more children that are able to join and access those clubs. So thank you for bringing that up, because I did not address clubs. I appreciate it.
Okay, Bahar Iran Manish, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Hi, Jen.
Hi.
So Ruby's thriving in the distance learning piece, and obviously she misses her friends like a lot of the kids. And I know for us choosing the hybrid model, it's to fulfill that socio-emotional. And I know that last night somebody asked in the board meeting from John Lyons about the decision around breaking out the groups in alpha. So has there been any thought into maybe doing something other than alphabetical order, or is that has that been finalized? That's my first question. And the second question is, the class size of 9, is that to allow for new enrollees or people to come back into the district who had maybe left the district or recently moved into the district? And will they
I wish. I wish that was why. Was that all your questions? Sorry.
Those are all my questions. Yeah. So
okay. No, I wish the 9 was that we were leaving space. Unfortunately, we have small classrooms here. And I mean, Mr. Morgan and I have done everything we can to try to be creative with how we can place desks, but in order to keep that 6 feet distance between students and make sure that they are safely distanced and follow the guidelines of the state, we can only fit 9 students in a classroom. So that is partially, I mean, that is not partially, that is the reason why only 9, not because we're allowing space for anyone else to join. And then as far as the alpha order to split, we have not discussed doing it any other way. I think that the one thing that your child will definitely have is if they're coming onto campus, they will still be with that class of students that they're currently with. So it's not that we would mix them into or mix them with another cohort of kids. They've already moved through as a class. So their option would be a group of 9 out of that class. So we're a little bit different than the high school because they are really grouping based on the classes you are taking, where we're grouping based on the cohorts we've already created in order to ensure that kids are staying where they should be and they have the same teachers. So unfortunately, it would most likely still be an alphabetical situation so that we could meet the needs of students or families who have kids at all campuses and they don't have students going on different days.
Okay, we have Karen Loveday Beasley. Karen, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Hi, I missed the first couple of minutes, so apologies if this was already covered. I had a couple of questions. One, are you requiring that parents sign a waiver before your child goes back to school on a hybrid model? And just so I'm 100% clear, the hybrid model is essentially 8 hours of teaching a week. Is that correct? It just seems not very much. Okay, thanks.
So yes, we will be requiring people to sign a waiver before they come onto campus that just explains, you know, the different things that we're doing to protect ourselves, the things that you will be doing to protect yourself. So that will be signed prior to a student joining the hybrid program. And unfortunately, yes, it's 8 hours of their core curriculum, but that doesn't mean that they won't still be doing asynchronous activities outside of the classroom. So that could be watching videos, doing activities online. They will also have that time on Fridays where they can connect for office hours. And then they will be, if they're taking electives, they will have electives on their off days. So those would be extra hours of teaching. But yes, that is one thing. If we come to a hybrid, unfortunately, when you split a school in half, that's kind of how it ends up to fit everybody on campus and get them through safely.
So I just want to do a time check real quick. We're at 4:42 if my clock is correct. So we have 8 minutes before we have to be done with this one for the next. I'm going to go ahead and allow Shojin, so I'm sorry if I mutilate names, Shojin, to ask the question again. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Tricia. My name is Shogun. And I also wanted to thank you all for doing this and explaining it and allowing us to ask questions. The follow-up question I had hearing this was, either way, you had mentioned that maybe chorus students would be able to come together on Fridays. And does it depend on whether or not they're choosing to do the distance learning model or the hybrid model? Are all kids, regardless of which model they're choosing, able to do that? The chorus, if the chorus happens on Fridays, would everybody be welcome to do that? Or do you have to choose the hybrid model in order to be able to participate in chorus?
That's an excellent question. And let me preface that with the fact that we also have to look at where the guidelines are for chorus. So up until now, we haven't been able to have students singing on campus because, you know, you're projecting. But if and when we're able to do that, I foresee that even students who are in a distance learning model would be able to come on and partake in those activities, so that they're able to be part of that chorus. And especially with band, because you want to be able to come on and play with other people and be able to, you want to have the whole group there. So yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. Oh, and let me add too, I'm just getting comments here from my district office folks that are clarifying things for me, so I appreciate it. When you're looking at the cohort assignments, which was Bahar's question, if a student has no siblings, we can possibly move you to a different pair of days. And we may have to do that anyways to balance classes. So it's more if there's siblings involved that will be going by the alphabetical to ensure that they're on the same days. Thank you to my support staff out there. Go ahead, Tricia, next question.
Seabury, go ahead and ask your question.
It's Rain. Hi, Miss Casper. I was wondering if it would be possible if you could do outdoor learning, so more people would be able to learn in one class.
That's a great question, and that's something that we actually looked into. And the problem with that is that there's a number of problems, but one of them being that our weather is so inclement here that it's difficult. A lot of times we're in the fog in the morning and the rain, and if and when it was a day that was at all inclement, or if the weather changed halfway through, we would have nowhere to put all of those students. And then on top of that, there are very strict guidelines for how we can bring students onto campus outdoors. We have to have certain tents and certain sizes. And the last that we looked into it, it was not doable at the time. So that's a great question, but we're just sticking to half the campus on at one time and half not. And also we don't have enough teachers. That's the whole other part of it, because we would have to literally double our teaching staff in order to be all on campus and teaching cohorts.
Mark Angel, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you very much. I have a follow-up question that's a little different. First of all, I didn't catch when our start and finish times would be. Second, and especially if we are participating in busing, and how far out the bus is going to be able to pick kids up. Like we're out at Middle Canyon Road off Rancho, and I don't know if you have to be beyond the village to qualify. And lastly, what about doing chorus in the gym so the kids could be in a larger environment? Wouldn't that make it possible for them to do chorus? And still, it's because they're not really maybe using the gym as much at that time period on Fridays?
So the gym is still limited to only 14 people. So we cannot have a group any larger than 14 people, or 15 with an adult, I believe, in the gym. So that wouldn't be an option, and the gym will most likely be used for PE. I think you're talking about Fridays though. So it depends on how many students are in the chorus, and it doesn't matter. It would be better outside, because then you're outside and the students could sing and it's a safer environment. Teachers can also move their students outdoors if they would like. So that is an option. But that would be why we weren't able to utilize the gym, is because especially with singing, if they're going to allow us to do it, it's going to need to be in an outdoor environment. That's at least based on the guidelines right now.
Okay. Trisha Glass, please ask your question, and depending on time, it might be the last one.
Hi there, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering, for the distance learning option, are students going to be receiving 2 days? Well, I know you're not really sure of it, but is the idea that they would receive 2 days of live instruction and then 2 days of asynchronous also?
Yes, so theirs would be very similar to what a hybrid student is doing on campus, where they will receive 2 days of instruction that's their core, and then 2 days of instruction that are electives. Unless we have to get creative with how we do those different class periods that I was talking about, where maybe they're doing like science one day and then math and language arts another day, and they're fitting that in with their electives. We haven't looked clearly at that yet, what our options are based on the numbers, but it wouldn't matter however we mixed it up. They will be seeing people every day, and it will be following fairly the same program that the hybrid is doing, just it will be all distance learning.
Do you want to take the last question? And
it's up to you.
Okay.
I'm up for it if you are.
We have one question and one question only. So Shelley, you can ask your question. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Shelley, if you don't mind.
Hi, thank you. You addressed it, I think, just in the previous question, but I was at the school board meeting, or listening to the school board meeting last night, and I was kind of getting the idea, especially in the elementary segment portion, that the curriculum between the distance learning and the hybrid might not be the same, because they would be moving at different paces. And so again, I think you kind of addressed this in the question before, but is the curriculum going to be the same? The people who are in distance learning, are they going to be at the same place in the curriculum as people who are doing the hybrid?
Yes, they will. That's a good question. And I did hear that answer last night. And I think what they were referring to is, and actually I'm not going to say what they were referring to, because I just remember it being commented on, and I thought it was about With elementary, it's a little bit different because teachers are doing different things with us. A student will be getting the same curriculum, whether they're on campus or whether they are staying home. So thank you for letting me clarify that. I know that we need to end. I want to let you all know that I really appreciate all the kind comments and you being a part of this today. Please, 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 I know we weren't able to get to all the questions. Email me, I will answer. I'm on top of it. I usually can get back to you fairly quickly. So if you want further clarification, I will also post this presentation with some more clarification around the information that's on here tomorrow in the Friday letter I'll be sending out. So hopefully that will also, I know, as I said earlier, I need the visual, so it'll help you to go back through it again and just be able to kind of sit with it and sink in. But even next week, as you're making the decision, if you feel like you just need a little more clarification, feel free to reach out at any time. And I really appreciate Sarah and Melissa being with me. They just don't ever stop talking. It's annoying, but I'm just kidding. So thank you all. Have a great night. And I appreciate you being here. Take care.
Is my man Ryan there?
I am. I see you went to work.
We're live.
Okay, thank you.
Jay, I muted you. We're live, just so you know. For all the attendees currently watching and waiting for the next presentation to begin, it should begin promptly at 5 p.m. for the elementary. So please be aware that you'll just be sitting and enjoying whatever your view is right at the moment until that presentation starts. Thank you. For all of you just joining us watching on YouTube and joining the presentation, I just want to keep reiterating that the presentation will start at 5 p.m. with the elementary principals and CCDC director. Until then, please stay tuned.
Good evening, River School parents and Tularcitos parents. It's great to be here with you this evening. My name is Jay Martin. I'm the principal at Carmel River School, and I am here with my younger and better looking colleague over at Tularcitos, Ryan Peterson, who I have the pleasure of working with. And this evening, we are going to present to you what we call our hybrid plan, which is an in-person student return to school. And we're going to present some details of that model as opposed to what you're currently experiencing in remote learning. And we're doing that for the purpose of informing parents, educating parents so that they can make a decision by actually a week from tomorrow regarding which model they're going to choose. Are they going to stay in distance learning, or are they going to be returning part-time to school? So that is the purpose of this evening. We want to educate parents so they can make a decision that they feel is in the best interest of their child. Would you like to add anything to that, Mr. Peterson?
Unmute. No, just welcome everybody. These nights are always great nights. The only hard part is we can't see you. So wish that could happen, but hope you find this night informative and give you the information that you need to make the best choice you can for your children. We're also here with Laura Dunn, Director of CCDC, because we know we might have some TK parents that are listening as well. And when some of this will apply to you, and then more specifics will apply to Carmel and how things are working there. So Laura, I don't know if you want to say hi.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Ryan. Glad to be here. So when I know there was very few, but specific questions, I just want to be here to answer those for you if need be.
Okay, sounds great. And I will share with our audience that we definitely want to end by 6 o'clock. There is a presidential debate, the last one before the election, that we want to respect and allow parents to turn that on as well. So if in fact there are questions that people have beyond 6 o'clock, we will take those offline, either through phone calls or through email. So let's get started here. Ryan Peterson, there you go. He has the magic fingers there with navigating our slide presentation this evening. So what we're going to first address is we're going to address the hybrid model. Again, that is the in-person model right now. We have, our hybrid model is going to be designed, it's going to be structured in a way that staff has referred to as this ABC model. If you look at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you see that there is an A group. That would be half, of course, of a class that would be at school. And then the next day, which would be Tuesday, that group would actually be home learning. And then again on Wednesday, they're back at school. Thursday, they are at home. And these two groups alternate in that fashion. On Friday, both groups actually would meet with their teachers in the morning, in a morning meeting, but afterward, they would be doing independent work, what we call asynchronous work. And we should probably define that pretty quickly so that teachers have that day to prep and to plan for their students. This model, because it has students and teachers essentially together all day from 9 to 2, without breaks that they have had and prep periods that they have had in the past, where, for example, they would have specialist programs perhaps in the midday and whatnot. Teachers don't have that luxury anymore where they can plan, and planning time is essential to the success of the students' education. So that is the need for the Friday planning day. So what this schedule results in is students, again, at school 2 days a week from 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock, unless they are in kindergarten. And that time would be 9 o'clock to 12:30. That 12:30 end time includes lunch. And the way that we would further develop this is we will define those cohorts as by alpha order, A through K, And then we've got L through Z. That is how we're going to split students. If we find that classes are radically imbalanced as a result of that, then of course we're going to make adjustments to ensure both the numbers are equal and any special needs that we need to address as well. And I will say as well, obviously when students are in front of a teacher, they are involved in their core instruction. On those off days when they're at home, those would be the days that they would have their specialist program participation. And in addition to that, what I referred to earlier is asynchronous work, that is independently assigned work. That could be online through the web portal. It could also be hard material, tangible material work, and it would not entail any time, any connection with the teacher. No live instruction with the teacher, again, who will have the other group of students in front of them, the B group of students. So we want to make sure that parents understand on those off days that teachers will not be meeting with students. And I'm going to hand it over now to Mr. Peterson.
All right, so like Mr. Martin pointed out, the hours of first through fifth grade will stay that 9 to 2 time slot. And then kindergarten, when they are at school, it'll actually be 9 to 12:30 because they'll have that lunch period at school. But when they are at home, that time at home will be 9 to 12. So those are the hours that we're going to do. When we went into this originally, this distance learning model, we decided to go 9 to 2 because we felt that those would be hours that we could continue with as our models flexed. And so as we get ready to switch into a hybrid mode, we're going to maintain those hours for a sense of consistency for the students, for you families at home, to maintain those routines. In addition to what Mr. Barden pointed out, with when students being at school, getting their core academic instruction, that'll also be the time where they will be able to have a closer social emotional connection and learning with their teacher. We know that coming back from distance learning, when students arrive back on campus, there's going to be a transition time. We know we're going to have to allow time for that. We know that the community that they have in their classroom with that cohort, that small group of students, is going to be important to develop, as it could be a new group of students that we'll get to in a little bit. And so they'll have that time during the day to develop those connections and spend time with some social emotional learning, because when they're at home, they won't have that connection to the teacher because they will be doing the asynchronous work. The other thing to know, and then we're talking about a hybrid here. So in a hybrid model, when they're at school, when the students will still have recess, they'll still have lunch, but it will be designed to where the cohorts stay together and all have designated areas where they will play or where they will eat. And so it will not be like the normal recess time with kids running around every which way and deciding what game they want to play. It will be much more structured. We know for the health and safety reasons, we need to maintain those cohorts. And so each lunch and recess period, each cohort will be assigned a section. We'll probably rotate those on a regular basis so kids get access to different recess play structures and equipment, but we've got to make sure to maintain those cohorts. And the same goes for lunch, snack time. They'll have designated areas where they will be assigned to eat those. And then when at home, again, just to reiterate what Mr. Martin said, it'll be work that when children are at home in a hybrid model, the work will be asynchronous. So their teachers will assign them work that they will need to do at home by themselves. We will have some limited assistance from our instructional aides to provide students when they're at home. So they'll have that assistance, but it will, in the hybrid model, require that parents be able to provide that assistance when those students are at home on those days, because the teachers will be busy teaching kids that they have in front of them. The other thing, though, when the students are at home, that is when students will have their specials in this model. And so when students are at home and on the computer, they will have their specials, PE, science, music, art, all of those. And those will be done synchronously. because when the students are at home, we still need to have that live interaction, and we still also need to take attendance. And so that is where attendance will also be taken when students are at home to make sure they are engaged in school. It'll be done through the live synchronous classes of the specialists.
Ryan, before we
Yes,
move on,
Dr.
I just want to make a quick note about TK. Is that okay?
Yep, go.
Okay, so the hours where it says kinder hours, those, we are not entirely sure what TK hours are going to look like because it's only one classroom. We have to wait until we find out how many children are actually wanting to come back. That will have a huge impact on the hours that we can provide that hybrid model. So I just wanted to put that out there, that has not, it won't necessarily be those same hours. We have to find out how many children want to come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. All right, Mr. Martin.
Sure. So we want to review health and safety practices that are going to occur at school. Of course, we're following guidelines from the California Department of Public Health, our local health, Monterey County Health Department as well. We have also teamed with a company called Forensics Analytics, who have essentially audited and met with us as principals to walk our campuses to talk about how best to implement safety practices and safeguards that will best protect our students. And in addition to that, after that visit, and it brings us to the first point here with site sanitization, and signage. We actually teamed with another company after we did this audit, where we are going to have signage throughout campus that will be directing students and staff, for example, to wear their masks at all times. It'll designate a flow of traffic that is to occur in the hallways. We will have decals that are on the ground, on the asphalt, that promotes 6-foot distancing as well. And of course, we are going to have daily and an intensive cleaning of classrooms and other areas as well. We're going to have a daily wellness check, screening and temperature checks, and those are going to occur when families first arrive. Mr. Peterson and I have talked about this, and we have a system that we'll be sharing with parents soon about the fact that because parents and visitors can no longer come in the interior of campus and must remain on the exterior, what we will do is we will greet vehicles, and at those vehicles is where we will have the wellness screening and also take the temperature of students. In addition to that, please note, this is very important because I hear from parents that for some, this is sort of a deal breaker where they don't feel that their kids can, in fact, all day wear a mask. Our school district is requiring that all students, kindergarten through 5th grade, wear masks at all times in the classroom, out of the classroom, with the exception of eating. So even at recess, parents need to know that that will be the mandate. Of course, and we have this later in our presentation too, we're never going to berate students. We're never going to raise our voice. We're always going to be very positive, very nurturing in terms of the reminders that we know that we're going to have to engage in, citing our character pillars, for example, of how we care for one another by engaging in this practice. We just want parents to know, again, that we're going to have masks at all times, that we're going to maintain physical distancing as well, even with the way we're structuring our classrooms, where students will be seated 6 feet apart at all times and away from the teacher too. We'll get into that a little bit later, I believe, as well, when we talk about the reality too of that expectation. And we know at times that as practical, that 6 feet of distance, of course, is going to be breached. But we do want our students, our parents, our staff to know that it is our expectation to maintain as practicable 6 feet of distance, whether or not we're inside or outside. And we're going to have these stable cohorts that we just talked about earlier in place, and they will travel throughout the school day together too, in order to minimize the contact that these groups would have one another and to prevent COVID transmission, if in fact it exists on campus. And that also allows for better contact tracing as well, should we have a need for it. And we're going to work with our kids and educating them about regular hand washing anytime they enter or exit our classrooms, for example, before lunch, and things of that nature. Thank you.
So I think that a lot of times with the health and safety, people wonder, well, what's going to happen when somebody does get sick? Like Mr. Martin referred to, Forensics Analytics is a consulting group that we've contracted with to help us put all of those procedures in place. It's a nice 128-page document that's getting finalized believe this week. The first thing to know, just in general, and obviously we know part of this document has kind of a flow chart or a game plan for all the different scenarios that could happen with someone getting sick, because we know there are multiple, and each case can have its nuances and be very different from one another. And one small nuance can make a big difference in how you might treat a case. So the general things we want parents to be aware of is when a student or staff member gets sick, they will be isolated. We'll have designated areas where students will go that are sick. They'll be evaluated by our school nurse and then immediately sent home. So, and based on that evaluation, we'll know what we need to do next, or what you as a parent might need to do next, given the student's sickness and their symptoms. We'll be using that flow chart that we've developed with our consultants to figure out what those next steps will be. And so, like I said, there are so many different variables in those, but which is why we want parents to know that it is well thought out in what's going to happen, and each case is going to be so individual that we're going to have to treat it case by case. But this is something too that when students get sick on campus, one thing that we don't have on here, but we do know is that even if they're sick, normally students have to be symptom-free for 24 hours. In this pandemic environment, students have to be symptom-free for 72 hours before they can come back onto campuses. And so that's something to know as a family, that there is that longer wait time. Obviously, when you're at home, you'll still be working with the teacher and the classmates, just like you would if you were normally sick, to maintain work and keep up on what's going on. Mr. Martin?
So what does happen when a student or staff member is confirmed to have COVID? I share with parents already that I want them to know that the most important point that we can make is that we would work very closely with the Monterey County Health Department, who would give us guidance. And as Mr. Peterson shared a moment ago, we also have a flow chart developed with our consultants outlining what to do in various situations. He also mentioned that this document is very long. I think it's 125 to 140 pages. And you can imagine, therefore, the various scenarios that, for example, we have to consider when we're trying to best protect our children. But in addition to that, if we have a student who, in fact, it's confirmed that they do have COVID, or teacher, then that class would have to quarantine for 14 days. But not just that class. You have to think of a class from the perspective that involves both A and B hybrid cohorts, because the students share a teacher and they share similar space as well. So both cohorts, should a student test positive, would actually move to distance learning.
So that gives you a very broad overview of what hybrid looks like, of what it would, and I would encourage parents to try to visualize with what we've just said, what that day at school would look like, what that day at home would look like, so that you can get that picture in your mind as you're going to have to make a choice here in the near future. Now we wanted to switch to distance learning, because for distance learning, it will stay much the same, but there will be some differences also. It won't stay the exact same as it is now. And so those people that have it in their mind, they want to stay distance learning, it's important to know what changes are going to happen when we make this transition, so that you know what to expect. The first thing to realize is it'll state in the letter that you'll get, I think being sent out on Friday, is that this decision to stay distance learning is going to be one that you're going to make for the duration of the school year. And that's with the lens that that will be in, probably be in hybrid for a long time, potentially through the school year. Of course, if things have substantially change in our county and we're able to maybe head in a new direction, we'll reevaluate that. But it is important to know that for right now, you really need to look at this as a decision you're making for the year to stay in distance learning. And to know that with that, it's not going to be a decision that you can switch back and forth and try one out and then see how it goes and then decide it's not going well and flip-flop back. Because there are a lot of changes that are going to have to be made when we make this change around staffing, class placement, that we will not be able to reshuffle as people are changing their minds. And so I know that can be hard to think about for an entire year, but that is what we need you to do right now. And so as we go through this presentation, please think in that route. Did I hear somebody else? No? Okay. The reason we can offer distance learning is because of a part of SB 98 that we've underlined here, which is that, and as a district, we've decided to say that if you feel that you would be putting your student at risk by in-person instruction, that you can choose distance learning. So, and we're not going to ask for any sort of doctor's note or anything like that. This is going to be a choice that you're going to have to make, and you get to make. So what will distance learning look like after we move to hybrid and open up hybrid? Monday through Thursday will look much the same as it does now. The students will be in distance learning, again, for 1st through 5th from 9 to 2. For kindergarten, that's 9 to noon. And for TK, that's to be determined to do the best we can for that age level. The things that might change or will most likely change on Monday through Thursday is that right now, most classrooms have their specials in the afternoon. Their PE, music, all those classes are in the afternoons. And so a lot of the academics are done in the morning. When we have to run 2 different programs, hybrid and distance learning, and make sure everybody gets their specials, that we're going to have to change that schedule at each site. And so specials will happen throughout the day. Could be as early as 9 o'clock, could be as late as the 1:20 time, whatever the last time is right now. And so that's important to know for those people that are going to be on distance learning, that the academic day could extend after lunch. And so, which is slightly different for some grade levels as it is now. The other thing to know is that on that Friday, because now those classroom teachers are going to be going, and one thing we learned through this is that the teachers need a lot of time to do this. We know our teachers are working now more than they've ever worked before, and we need to put more planning time in there. We also want the teachers to be able to collaborate together, the distance learning teachers and the hybrid teachers. And so it was very important for us to make sure that we gave the distance learning teachers the day on Friday to do that. So on Friday, similarly to hybrid, they'll have a morning meeting, and then the students will be working on asynchronous work the rest of the day while the teachers collaborate. And so we want the teachers to be able to stay in as close proximity as they can to each other in their planning. Although from day to day, it could look different. Right now, grade levels are pretty lockstep because they're all teaching the same model. When this happens and things change, the distance learning group and the hybrid group could get a little off in their regular day to day, but we want them to be able to stay with each other as much as they possibly can. So that collaboration is going to be extremely important. Mr. Martin, anything you want to add on the distance learning model of the week before we go to the next slide?
Just maybe one qualification, which is The similarities between River School and Tularcitos' program are exceptional, you're going to find as parents. We might have schedules that are a little different. For example, with our specialist classes, with our remote learning option, they might be based more in the afternoon. We are still actually, and as I know Tularcitos is as well, in process and determining what those schedules will inevitably be, but I would want parents at River School not to be disappointed if you notice that in a remote learning choice that specialists still are weighted more toward the afternoon, as opposed to hybrid where the specialist classes absolutely, when the students are at home, will be represented throughout the school day. All right?
All right.
Okay, so here we are making a choice between the hybrid model and the distance learning element model. For everyone, of course, we want parents to know, this is very important, that a child's teacher may change. There's even a possibility that a school of enrollment, and we're referring to the distance learning option there, that could change as well. This is because we're going to have to adjust staffing to meet whatever our needs are in terms of how parents respond. And if we have a teacher, for example, who we find we need 1 or 2 at a grade level to be in the remote learning assignment, obviously, if a student in that class decides that they want to remain at school, then that teacher could no longer be their teacher of assignment. So those are scenarios that could absolutely impact who a student is paired with. So when we say it's a possibility, it's an exceptionally strong possibility that your child actually may not be any longer with their teacher of assignment currently. So we want parents to know that either way, whatever option that they do choose. Here's some key considerations for distance learning, which is obvious. The personal COVID health concerns that we want to respect for parents. They might therefore have concerns to the point where they don't have an awful lot of confidence in either how things are structured or just how scary this situation is to begin with. So they might want to retain remote learning as their option. How's your child doing currently in distance learning? I'm a parent, granted my kids are much, much older, but that would be the primary question that I would want answered, which is, do you want to roll the dice, so to speak, if in fact your child is doing really well, and knowing what Ryan Peterson said about the fact that we're asking parents to choose and then stay. That's the expectation in the model that they choose. So if your child in fact is doing well, do you want to risk that? As a parent, I would answer that, or will answer that, and I'll say, no, I would not. I would want to stick with the option if in fact you feel that it is going relatively well. Notice I use the word relatively because we all know that this pandemic has its challenges and nothing is perfect. But if that's your assessment that remote learning is working for my child, you should strongly consider retaining that option. Of course, in distance learning, know that your child will be 4 days online with the teacher. In addition, we said on the 5th that the child would join the teacher for just a morning meeting, but the rest of the day, again, would be independent. And more of this experience may be synchronous. And again, when we say synchronous, we're referring to more live instruction, more Zoom time with the parent, and, teacher, and less we anticipate video taping of lessons as well. And we already spoke to the fact that there'll be specialist classes perhaps in the, notice I said perhaps, at River anyway, represented throughout the day until academics at 2 o'clock. You can read, I know, key considerations for hybrid, but do you desire that socio-emotional context and contact with your child's teacher and the other kids, knowing though, that you're looking through the lens of how we have described school will be structured. It is not returning to school as is typically experienced year in and year out. You heard us talk about 6-foot distancing. You heard us talk about all the signage. You heard us talk about the limited ability that kids will have to interact with other students because of this need to maintain these stable cohorts. So school is going to look exceptionally different than kids regularly experience. And of course, we and you would have a responsibility to inform students of that fact before they arrive at school or before you make your decision. Of course, in hybrid, the students will be with us 2 days a week and at home 3 days a week. In hybrid, for sure, those specialist classes would be throughout the day as opposed to just in the afternoon. And we will really have a need to focus even more so on the priority standards, given that the teachers will be with the students only in person anyway, 2 days a week. So we feel that these are some key considerations that should assist parents in making a decision. Anything you want to add, Ryan?
No, I think that hit it well. I know that we get a lot of questions about timeline and what is the timeline for this to happen. There's things that we know, and there's definitely some things we don't know, and that seems to be the world that we're all living in these days. We do know that there will be a parent letter sent out or an email sent out tomorrow, October 23rd, asking for parents to commit one way or the other, and that parent committal determination letter is going to be due Friday, October 30th. So that'll give you the weekend parents next week to think about things. Mr. Martin and I have been working on a quite lengthy Q&A document.
Yes.
Ideally, a Q&A document would be about 2 pages. This one's 10, I believe. And so it goes into a lot of depth. We wanted to make sure to think of the questions that a lot of people would ask to get you that information. That will be coming out tomorrow along with a copy of this presentation, as well as a place where you can submit questions that are lingering in your mind. We don't want to overload our offices with phone calls from parents about what's going to happen. They're still doing their full jobs. And so we're going to create a Google Doc that's going to allow parents to submit their questions so we can get back to people. The thing to know too, that CUSD is going to submit a waiver or an application for a waiver the first week in November. And then after that, it's somewhat out of our hands. Then we have to wait for the approval from Monterey County first, from then the state next. That could be weeks. We don't know how long that process is going to take. And so, and then the other option too, obviously for coming back into hybrid is that if Monterey County numbers drop and we get to a place where the situation in Monterey County, we get to the red tier for a long enough time, and then we can look at coming back into in-person instruction. So there's where that unknown is. And then once we know we've got the waiver, once we know that we're good to go in either situation, then the CUSD board and district administration will set the start date at that time. And so we do need to have the CUSD board of education's approval to take that next step and to move to hybrid. So that is the what we know and what we don't know of the timelines. Mr. Martin, anything you want to add?
No, maybe you did a great job. Maybe just again emphasizing what you did over and over, but I'll do it too, which is the FAQ. So Ryan and I are both kind of less is more individuals, just to include critical information. But I have to tell you, in order to empower you to make as a decision as best you can, this document is lengthy. So there are dozens of questions that we have provided answers for. And I think Mr. Peterson mentioned as well that we'll have a link on that doc as well, that if in fact we didn't answer your question, you'll be able to submit a question yourself.
So I think before we hit the questions time and open it up to the audience, I do just to let parents know that when we originally put out a survey over this, was it summer? Who knows? I can't. It's all blurry. Summer didn't exist that much for Mr. Martin and myself. We put out that survey asking what the parent intentions were. We just had a handful of people at the time indicating that they would come back stay distance learning when we opened up for hybrid. from just informal conversations that we've had with people, we know that that has significantly changed, and to where more and more people are considering to stay into distance learning, which has made us kind of shift a little bit of our planning too, and trying to keep some options open. And I know it's shifted my thinking as a parent. My kids aren't quite as old as Mr. Martin's. I have a first grader, I have a middle schooler, I have a high schooler, and my thinking has shifted. I was asked last night at the board meeting what I thought, and I don't know what we're going to do with my own kids yet. We're still making that decision. And but one shift in my own thinking that I found helpful was to think of this decision in two different ways. The first one is to think of it to assume that you're going to come back in a hybrid model, and then think, well, why might I stay in a distance learning model? But to also then flip that thinking and think of it, okay, let me assume I'm going to come back and let me assume I'm going to stay distance. Why would I come back in hybrid? And so doing that helped me reframe some of the things, and trying to make that decision of what's best for my kids, and knowing that each of my kids is different also, and what I might decide for one child might be different from the other. And so just given how things are going with distance learning, but that mindset of what I'm assuming I'm coming back to and what I would need to think about was a good thing for my own mind just to share with other people. Any last minute thoughts, Mr. Martin?
No, let's open it up to questions. We have 23 minutes.
Perfect. So your first person is going to be Shelley Rittermall. Shelley, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I have a few questions. I'll try to do it in a minute here. First of all, I wanted to just confirm regarding the curriculum and how much academics will actually be taught. If it was hybrid versus distance learning, are they going to still get the same amount of academics in both structures? I think Mr. Peterson referred to that that distance learning and hybrid could get a little off, but they're going to stay together as much as possible. And last night when I was listening to the school board meeting, there was something said that made me think that they would be moving at much different paces, and thus that one model would not get as much learning done as the other. So I wanted you to comment on that. And my second question was, in the past, classes have always been discussed as being balanced, academic level wise, I suppose, the balancing of that. And I understand the positives of that and encourage that. But in our new situation here, where we're only going to be in school 2 days a week, and you're saying that it's going to be hard to get some of all that academics done in that amount of time. Has it been thought about moving to a different philosophy during these 2 days? So sometimes it's more efficient to teach to similar academic levels instead of academic levels that are spread all over that grade level. So to be more effective and efficient in the short amount of time that teachers have face-to-face with the kids, is that something that's being considered a different kind of balance? And my third quick question is the morning meetings on Friday, how long are we talking about? Is this like a 15-minute meeting or an hour meeting? Thank you.
All right. I don't know if you want to take turns, Mr. Martin, or but the first one, because yes, I brought that up, Shelley, I think last night, with the potential for a different pace in the curriculums, and I think that that is very real. I know, even Mr. Lyons in his high school presentation last night commented about the impact of a hybrid on a high school curriculum. When you cut down from 5 days a week of seeing your kids or your students to 2 days a week of them in front of you, there's a need to really to look at your curriculum. We know we still got to get through the year's curriculum, and we will do that in any model. The question becomes what all gets covered in that time. So we've really got to evaluate in and both changes now, but especially in the hybrid model, everything that we're going to get to in that week, because we've only got 2 days with the kids in front of us, and we've got to maximize that, knowing that the next day they're going to be practicing, and we want to make sure they can practice what they can. And so, whereas in the distance learning, the kids will be getting those 4 days with their teacher each day. And so we'll try to, for the sake of even teachers and planning, keep the kids in that same path as much as we can. But just knowing that just by the sheer number of minutes the students have with their teacher, there very well could be things that the distance learning kids get to that the hybrid kids don't. There could be some things that the hybrid kids experience on those off days that maybe the distance learning students don't, but that is a definite factor. Mr. Martin, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I think that while I would agree, and while we'll have considerable collaboration talking about pacing between remote learning and also the hybrid model, we also have to concede the fact that an advantage that parents have in coming to hybrid is that they desire the socio-emotional connection that the other students aren't receiving. So it is an imperfect world. It's an imperfect situation that would in effect lead to some difference in pacing, but we're going to do our best to ensure that that students are not in a position where their learning is greatly compromised because one group is on a fast track and the other is not. Regarding the composition of the classes, it's still board policy that we actually have to balance those classes according to different criteria that include academic performance, special needs, socio-emotional needs. And we're going to do that also, though, under the context, first and foremost, of going by that A through K and that L through Z class placement protocol. It's also actually it violates ed code if we were to engage in something that could be perceived as tracking, meaning if we had one high group and then one low group. But I do want to assure, I think it was Shelly and other parents, the good news too is that look, we don't yet know how many kids are going to be in a class. If you ask me, my guess is it's going to be exceptionally low. Parents need to know that it could be, conceivably it could be anywhere from say 5 kids to 10 kids in a classroom. I would not be surprised if we ended up with 6 or 7 students in a class on a day in the hybrid model. And imagine that time and that interaction and that intensive instruction that a teacher can provide when you have that few students. Regarding the Friday meeting, we don't know yet. I will the length of the time. I anticipate, and I'm guessing Mr. Peterson would as well, that it would be shorter because of the need that the teachers have for that planning day. They're going to be collaborating and use every minute that is available to them. My guess, but there is no mandate yet, is that it would be along the lines more of a check-in. So maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but I don't want to commit to what exactly that time would be yet. More conversation will occur.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that for the Friday morning meetings, it could depend on what's being asked of the students that Friday as well. And like Mr. Martin said, how much the teachers need to check in, how much they need to give instruction. I know they're going to want to interact with their kids on that Friday as well in that morning time. So the time commitment, same thing. We can't commit to a time right now, but it also could be a varied time amount depending on what's going on that week.
Right.
Hey, Jill Lewis. Jill, can unmute yourself and please ask your question, please.
Hi, thanks, Trisha. Yeah, I thought Shelley had a great point there, but I heard Jay's concern that he has to keep up with the board policy. Maybe the board can consider changing this policy, because I think it would be more effective to teach to certain levels of kids, especially in kindergarten. We have kindergartners who are reading in my daughter's class, and kindergartners, that don't know their letters yet. So if my daughter can read some words and gets put in a class that with kids that can't, don't know half their letters yet, she's really not going to learn that much. And I have a question on kindergarten, which is the threat of COVID goes down is the threat is smaller the younger the kid, basically, with COVID. So I'm wondering why these kindergartners are only going to 9 to 12, since normally it's 9 to 2. And recently, in the past few months that we've been back at school, I only get 20 minutes to 25 minutes a day for my daughter. And it just doesn't seem at all to be enough. And then I'm also concerned about if I wanted to take a contract in work, which, it's starting to get hard to live on one salary here in Carmel. I was hoping that my kids would be at school at least 9 to 2, 2 days a week. And that means that they'll only be 9 to 12 will be the time that I have to work. And then my other question is, you talked about this before, Jay, months ago, multiple kids, will they be put, if parents have multiple kids, will they be put in classes at the same time, so that like my kids would go at the same time, so that I'm not going, 2 different days with 2 or 3 different kids, or like one of my kids is on A and one of my kids is on B.
Yes, moving backward, in regard to the question about will we assign kids to kids to the same cohort? Absolutely. We want to be very family friendly in that regard. To do otherwise, I think, would be very hectic and very challenging for parents. The length of the day, Jill, I forget what you said about what it typically was. It was actually shorter, the regular kindergarten day, even in a quote unquote normal year. And while it is only 2 days a week, the length of time that little ones can attend, we have found both again, I'm reading here 9 to 2 in a regular day. Yeah, but I just wanted to share that the challenge of educating the students in a hybrid mode, where they're essentially going to be with the teacher for a significant number of hours, is a concern, both in terms of exhaustion and other factors too. But we have discussed the length of the day in feeling that it would be more productive and healthier for the kids actually not to go a full day. I don't know if Mr. Peterson wants to add to that.
No, I think so. Yeah, it's not, 9 to noon is what the school day exists for kindergarten. And so I think it's important to maintain that. I agree that kindergartners going longer than that, and when they are at school, they will still be there for lunch and go a little bit longer on those days. But for sure, when they're at home, not going past noon is going to be something that we're going to strive for, so they can still be kindergartners.
Yeah, my apology when I got like Ryan said earlier, that it's hazy sometimes between memory of old about what our schedules were and what they are now, because of course kindergarten actually was 8:40 to 2 o'clock. But again, the kids had considerable breaks during a regular school year, as opposed to what they would receive in hybrid if they were on campus. And that's a real cause of concern.
Okay, so Jenica and Rob Sims is next. Please unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Oh, hi there. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of questions. Mine actually is also about the kinder situation. Was wondering, because we have one in kinder and one who's older, so the back and forth becomes challenging, and pick up and drop off and things when we work. Was wondering if there's an option to maybe give them more breaks during the day to have that 2 o'clock, or if there's something else they can do to kind of, I know obviously you guys aren't doing after school programs, but didn't know if there was a plan to be able to extend that a little longer. I think maybe I know the answer off of what you just said, but wanted to at least ask that. And then I wanted to ask about masks versus shields. I figured that would be a fairly quick question, so that might be just a yes or no. And was also wondering about the waiver and what the process there, or what was the sort of discussion, or what went into that and factoring doing that now as opposed to earlier in the year. Thank you.
And Rob Sims here to start potentially streamlining.
Rob, could you start over again? You got cut off there for a second.
Yeah, we're being muted.
No problem. So just a quick question. Jill had an interesting question about the potential for streamlining, certainly in the kinder years, how the school board policy is to not streamline. But Jill did ask the good question, is there opportunity for the board to change that policy?
I think so. Let's. I think there were 3 questions asked. One of them was about mask versus face shields, at least from our research that we've conducted and following the guidelines that have been availed to us, that masks are preferred versus face shields as a safety measure. Regarding the length of the day, I think we did cover that in terms of our concerns about what the length of the day would be, and developmentally talking about student exhaustion. But there was also a question, I believe, about the waiver. One of the reasons that I believe that we did not pursue a waiver earlier was because of COVID numbers. But in addition to that, our teaching staff has worked really hard to formulate these remote education plans. And one of the concerns that we actually even have right now as we consider hybrid learning is we feel that a lot of parents and our staff has just gotten our quote unquote sea legs about us, and that we are really starting to experience some successes. Not for everyone, we completely understand and concede that, but that we are getting into a groove, if you will, of remote learning where we're learning as we go, and that we feel that we are continually tweaking and have arrived at a place where the programs are pretty successful. And so we're even desiring now some consistency as well as we progress even further in being very careful about whether or not we want to start too soon and change gears and devise a whole new program too. So I do want to share with our parents that too has been a concern of ours as far as not jumping around between programs. We feel that there's an advantage as well in waiting, given the successes that I've described. And regarding the composition of classes, again, we have to be careful, because if we start to base it only on academic performance, for example, that does essentially amount to tracking. If we had one group of high students in a class in the morning, on one day, lower performing students on another day, is something that I believe still is in place, that violates ed code policy in terms of what a tracking situation is like. And I really want to emphasize that the number of kids in a classroom anyways is going to be so small, more than likely under 10 students. It could be conceivably under 7 students. That imagine the ability of a teacher to work with students of diverse performance levels anyway, given the intensive time that they're going to have with, in fact, instructionally with those kids.
I think in addition to that, I think it's important to point out that, the research behind that tracking is not positive, that you end up spreading the gap quite large. And I think too, with that though, also knowing that when we talk about balancing class size, even, with what could be some very, very, very nice class sizes, we will take into account the fact that, we want kids to have academic partners, at least, or other kids in their class that are at their academic level, so that you're not alone, so to speak. So you still have somebody to bounce ideas off of that we know some kids need that.
Okay, I just want to do a time check just real quick, because it's 5:54 and we have 11 people with their hands up. So if everyone can keep it to one question so we could try to get through as many, that might be helpful. And I'm sorry, but I'm just trying to help so we can get through as many as we can.
Thank you, Tricia.
So,
we won't be as long-winded either.
We'll be shorter.
Allison Dunton is next. Allison, you can unmute yourself, please.
Thank you. I guess my most important question that I have a couple, but I can send the others by email. Have any of the teachers already decided that they do not want to go back in person and they'll stay on distance learning? And if so, will those teachers be sharing with the parents their intent to do that? So we may have a better chance of keeping our student with the same teacher.
Teachers have shared with us their desire, whether or not it's a medical reasons and a necessity, or just kind of a preferred. No, we're not going to make that known because there's no way of knowing how many teachers are going to have to go out on distance learning. There's no way of guaranteeing that those will be the teachers that end up going out on distance learning, even though a teacher may prefer that. There's a lot of factors that go into that. If we have enough students to fill those spots, or if we don't have enough students to fill those spots. So no, it will not be known which teachers are wanting to go which way ahead of time. We want to make sure that, I know teacher connection is important, but I think we also want to make sure people are making this decision for the other factors involved too. Thank you, Austin.
Dominique Hittner, please unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to ask a question here. And I'll send you an email, Jay. The question I do have is there an opportunity for families to opt for a fully asynchronous option with maybe like inputs with Seesaw or something of that nature? Just as this plan is devised with the constant changes that may occur through the winter, and as you know, the vaccine may or may not arrive, I am very concerned. Thank you.
Hi, Dominique. To be honest, no, we do see a balance of asynchronous and synchronous instruction in a remote learning model. That has been the balance that I understand that might not work necessarily again for everyone, but we found that the balance between the two has resulted in a pretty effective and successful experience. It might require, again, it sounds like some adjustment at home that I respect, but there is no option to have a program be completely asynchronous.
So next up is Shell Lyons. Shell, if you can unmute yourself and please ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. I was wondering, for those of us who have temporarily removed our children because they could not handle Zoom and would do well in person, will we be offered those survey questions, or what is your recommendation for those of us who would like to go forward?
It's a really good question, Shell, because I know I got that from a parent out here at Tular that was that withdrew and wanting to come back. And yes, if you're not in our system anymore, so getting you a letter doesn't happen, but we would want that information if that's something that you're desiring. If people out there are desiring to re-enroll back once we're in hybrid mode, we need that information because that is going to influence how we can design classes. So it would be important to email Mr. Martin or myself or whichever school you are at, so that we know and can have your name down on the list.
So I have Jessica Henricks. Jessica, please unmute yourself.
Yes, hi, thank you. I just had a question about the specialist class, like the reading specialist classes currently in the distance learning. It's happening after school, at least for my student, for a period of time every day, except for the teacher, the days on Wednesday when they need their time to plan. So I'm wondering, in either the distance or the hybrid models, if that support is still going to be offered, or if it's going to be offered in a similar way, I guess.
So Jessica, the answer would be, our intention certainly would be to provide those kinds of resources and service to any student who demonstrates a need. I'll share with you at River School, we're still having conversations about how best to achieve that. In the past, we've called, for example, these respected blocks of times of no new instruction in classrooms, so we could pull kids into what we call these blue band periods to offer that kind of instruction that you're referring to. So what I'm sharing with you is that is something that we have not yet fallen on an exact model about how best to achieve that, but we even have an obligation to do that as well. So if a student in fact has been identified as needing support, that we need to offer that support. So more to come. I apologize, I don't have an exact answer about how it's going to be structured, but yes, that need and that service has to occur.
I hate to now be the one, I guess, to shut it down, Hunter. So I know it is 6 o'clock and we want to respect everybody's time. I know there are other people that had questions out there. Like we said, we are going to send out a very lengthy, we apologize, but we think you'll find it very informative Q&A document. It'll also have a link on there where you can submit questions to us so that we can get back to you. We want to make sure that families have the information that they need in order to make the best, this important decision and the best decision for your family. So please reach out using that link when we send it out tomorrow. And so if you can we ask that you do that rather than email us, so we can make sure to bring all those questions into one place. And also when they're overlapping questions, we can get back to multiple people at one time also. So that'll help us be more efficient in responding to all of you. So look for that Q&A document. You can look for this attached or this presentation, look for the link to submit questions. I really want to thank everybody for coming and listening. Again, I know it goes for all of us that we wish we could see your faces rather than ours on the screen. I don't know about Mr. Martin, but I'm getting tired of seeing my face on the screen so much. Laura, maybe if I had your face, it would be different, right? And yeah. Jay, no offense. Mr. Martin or Mrs. Dunn, you want to say anything?
No, I just want to thank everybody as well. I know it's a difficult decision. We're, again, as Ryan said, we're disseminating more information tomorrow. We'll be providing FAQ. I've got a video showing a day in the life of hybrid. In addition to that, we've got some sample schedules that people can look at in detail. So we're going to give you more information to make your decision. And I want to thank all of you for coming this evening. Much appreciated, and thanks for your support. We're doing our best here, although I know there's always some learning to be experienced. So thanks again, greatly appreciated.
And those TK families, you will get the same thing. I will send a little extra blurb that's specific to the Carmelo campus, but I will send that out tomorrow as well as we send the whole package. So thank you all for being here.
And everybody.
Good night.